And there's the ding that it is now time to begin.
All right, thank you, Rochelle, and thank you everyone for joining on this lovely afternoon. I know the temperature outside is a little higher than we expect this time around, but hopefully staying cool inside is our motto for this week, and we'll get through this high temperature season for this year. So this session, we're talking about IT project oversight and overview of what the processes is, what the requirements are, and in a way trying to talk more about why we are doing it first, and then talk about how we do it, what are the requirements around it, and where all of us can get more information about when we get our projects under oversight. I see a couple of names here in the chat window and people who joined. Some of you have already gone through and managed projects that have been under oversight. Some of you has been even more luckier to have their project subjected to gated funding requirements. So that's always a plus to have that experience. And if not, then hopefully when you get bigger assignments, more heavier projects, you will have projects under oversight. So the session here today is about IT projects oversight overview. Some of the topics that we will cover today, we'll start with purpose of oversight, so that we know why we do this oversight processes that all of us are engaged into. What are the oversight approval requirements? The additional requirements that may apply to projects under oversight. IT dashboard, that is another requirement that come to all of us from the legislators. Project governance structure, and status report and health assessments. So first thing is, why are we providing the oversight? What is the purpose behind our legislators and senators who give us the budget approvals every biennium and give us funding for the IT investments all of the agencies ask to meet, either directly as funded for the project or provided through the operating budgets to the agencies to execute those work. So IT project oversight, I'm going to just read it for now, is designed to assist state agency technology projects align with business goals and priorities, achieve success and planned outcomes. It's a very high level summary of why oversight is something that legislators have put into the budget several years back and continue to refine and revise those requirements. And the reason I say that is legislators is the oversight process and policies and procedures that WATEC, which contains OCIO as our office responsibilities, execute and ask all the agency partners to execute with us, is because we are obligated to execute these as part of legislative requirements. It starts from RCW, and I'll talk about that as well. Oversight consultants, I am one of those. Rochelle is there, and maybe a couple of others from our team are also on the call. We engage with all of the agencies as partners. We are not here to audit any work. We are here to partner with you, provide you those advisory and the consulting services, and also help you navigate through the oversight requirements, through the life cycle of the project. And the reason we say life cycle is we are there with you from the initiation to close out and help you work with you through the transition from project completion implementation to maintenance and operations. And this is all to provide the transparent visibility to the legislators, authorizing environments, and public at large. So that's where we talk about IT dashboard is we have a requirement and obligation to make sure we are transparent about all the effort and the resources we are spending that is coming from public tax dollars for IT modernization and other investments. So as I was mentioning, why are we doing it? Some of the requirements that come from the top down are coming from RCW. The reason we started talking about this is sometimes there's a mystery behind OCIO is asking us to do this. In a way, it is correct that OCIO is asking agencies to do certain things, but it is driven from RCW, from our legislators, from our budget approvals that guide us and require us to do certain things in a certain way. So on the top, we have RCW 43-105-245. It's a link directly to that RCW text that requires OCIO as part of the WATEC agency to establish the model, establish policies and procedures and guidelines for oversight. Some of the key sections that talk about compliance requirements, I've also listed, at least 5 of those are really focused around oversight. 205 about creating the policies and procedures. to 20 talks about strategic information technology plan and the performance reports. 240 talks about technology spending and budget request, aka our beautiful technology budget. 245, again, planning, implementation, and evaluation, which focuses on how are we going to ongoing evaluate the project success, what is the health of the project, is it progressing on track, or are there some deviations that need to be mitigated and addressed as a corrective action steps. And the 245 talks about the approval requirements of all major investments within the state by our office at WATEC. I also have a link for the operating budget of 23-25. In general, I mean, we have 3 budgets that come out each year: operating budget, transportation, and capital. Most IT projects are funded through operating budget. There are some that are either only from transportation or a combination of operating and transportation. And generally, there are very few IT investments that get funded through capital budgets, which are generally long-term investments. Probably, for lack of better, understanding that I have is, Department of Transportation generally gets capital funding for IT investments as well. 2 sections that I want to focus on in the budget is section 701. This is a very prescriptive detail in the enacted operating budgets each biennium that talks specifically about the gated funding requirements. What are the specific oversight documentation that projects need to produce, how that would be approved, what contents they need to provide, and what information we all collectively partner to make sure it is visible on the public IT dashboard. 701 and 155 talk about that. Rishal, would you be helping us with the chat? If there is anything, thank you.
Yes, we've had a couple questions, but they've already been answered in chat. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so now that we talked about why do we provide oversight, where does the requirement come from RCW through the policies and procedures, what is the oversight approval requirements? So the oversight approval requirements are primarily these 4 policies that are specific to oversight processes. On the top is policy 121. If many of you have gone through projects under oversight, you would have heard the word, it's by 121. This is a policy about IT investments, approval, and oversight. The policy also has certain guidelines and standards associated with it. It has very recently, as of July mid, has been enacted. And those updates are more to align with aligning our resources and agency resources collectively based on the profile of the project, not a one-size-fits-all that has been a model somewhat in the past, where we focus our energy, focus our time and resources where the project will get the most benefit out of. So somewhat of a tiered structure of oversight, then there are requirements and procedures defined for each of those tiers. Policy 122 speaks about administrative and financial approval process. This is when the investments have any relationship to administrative systems, financial systems, or relationship to Workday being implemented through One Washington program. Policy 131 is also an overarching policy that talks about managing the IT projects in general, what kind of procedures you should apply when you look at all the IT investments. And policy 132 provide the specific about the quality assurance requirements for projects under oversight. And I want to distinguish the quality assurance. Sometimes we think about quality assurance or QA as testing the software product coming as a result of the IT investment. This policy is about project quality assurance, how the project, the governance structure, project management policies and models and procedures are coming along, being put to align with the project profile and being followed in execution. So sometimes it happens, we put a plan, beautiful plan put together, and it is on the shelf. Execution doesn't always align. These quality assurance service providers would be keeping sort of an eye on it and helping all of us as partners to say, you have this plan, here is how we agreed to, let's align our procedures. And if the plan is out of sync, let's modify the plan so we all are executing from the same plan. So those requirements and asks come through policy 132. So these are the policies and procedures and guidelines. Then, as I looked at in the last slide, there's a discussion about RCW, and I'm going to flip over that quickly. 43-105-255 specifies what OCIO approval of an IT investment looks like. What does that mean? That translates to the next slide that I'm on, the artifacts that are required for our office at WaTech to approve the investment to proceed with a visible path to success. It starts with technology budget, which talks about what is your spending plan, where the budget is being spent from, and where the funds are coming from. And are you accounting for your project cost from initiation to close out and projecting the best estimates for 5 years of maintenance and operations, the holistic view. Project charter provides the guiding principle, the vision of what this project is all about. Why are we doing this investment? What is the benefit we are trying to achieve? What is the problem we are trying to solve? What additional cost efficient, business efficient services that we will be delivering to our constituents? How does it help the community at large? That vision and how are we going to measure those outcomes is defined in the project charter. Quality assurance services aligning with Policy 132. Are these services provided by external vendor, or this is something that some agencies, based on the risk profile of the project, may be able to secure within the agency? But there is a requirement to have a independent view of how the project is being managed and executed. These quality assurance service providers will also look at the project's readiness. And the readiness is about everything that has been done so far, the governance structure that has been put in place. Your planning effort has been put in place. How have you decided and planned to move forward through the implementation phase? We agree not everything is known, but do you have a plan enough to say we will know at certain point and then we will execute? So that's where the readiness assessment comes into play. As part of the readiness assessment, there may be some findings and gaps found. Those gaps will be provided and shared with the executive sponsor and the governance team and our office, and then agencies would be responding to it. And we use the word here carefully, response. It is not about addressing those on day one. It's about building your response plan. If you need to establish a specific planning document, because you might see certain things happen over the next 3 to 6 months, your response may be that we will prepare the plan in the next 3, 6, 8 months when situation comes to that, when we know more about it. That is your plan. So not about addressing it, but planning to address it. And then the last bullet point here is investment plan if required. So again, going back to those of you who have done your project under oversight, investment plan was always a required component of our OCIO approval of the project. With this 23-25 budget cycle and the way Section 701 artifact requirements has been written and modified, the requirements have evolved. And now there is more stress and more focus on agencies preparing their project charter for the most part. And I think it helps all of us because generally agencies prepare a project charter internally, which gives project manager and the team to that sort of a formal approval to proceed with project activities. So in those cases, additional investment plan has sometimes become a burden. You know, agencies and project team end up copying information from other artifacts and pasting it into a separate document. That copy paste means same information is now in 2 places, 3 places, and if there is change, you have to change multiple documents. To help with that, now that single project charter that you may have, which is approved by your executive sponsor, can be and will be a part of project approval by OCIO.
Puneet, I'm going to jump in here. We have 2 questions in chat.
Okay.
So love the applause. So the first question was from Paulette, and she was wondering at what point in the process are these artifacts required?
Wonderful question. That's an excellent question, and I think that also aligns with some of the revisions that we have recently applied to Policy 121. So going back to the approval, the way RCW is written is that approval of the investment by our office is required before the agencies get into a commitment of spending the investment money, which relates to agencies engaging with external vendors and solution providers or integrators or product providers into a signed contract to deliver that system. We have clarified that in the policy that the agencies can start, bring in a project manager, which is again external cost to the agency in times, or a quality assurance provider or business analyst before you get these artifacts approved. However, these artifacts and the approval is required before agencies get into the contract with external service providers, solution providers, software licenses, subscriptions, and things like that. I hope that answers your question, Fala.
Well, let us know if that doesn't answer your question. I know there's no specific timeline to be presented, but just in summary, you must have OCIO approval if you're under oversight before you engage in solutioning your system and engaging vendors and moving forward with that. Okay, and Paulette put a link in there with the decision package prioritization. So the next question was from David Yentis, and he was asking, how does the project charter relate to the investment plan? Because it seems to be overlapping.
It seems to be overlapping. I would not disagree with that. The need of the investment plan has been refocused based on projects, risk profile, potential issues, or complexity of the outcome that we're trying to achieve. So for the most part, when I say most part, most projects, imagine investment plan is no longer required. There are certain elements of information that our legislators have asked to be included in the project charter. There are 8 or 9 elements of information. We have provided a template of the project charter, which is part of policy 121, that contains those sections for those 9 or 10 elements, which you can refer, you can use as is, or you can have your own template that covers those elements as the information set for the project. You do not have to follow the template. It can be any way of template shape that you have that works within your agency. Maybe your PMO has a template provided that you use. All we ask is that the required elements in the project charter are included in that project charter. Investment plan itself may become required for some projects, generally for very high complexity projects. Now, as we are transitioning from last biennium to this, most projects in motion already have an investment plan. It's OK to carry and continue with that investment plan. You do not have to go back and rebuild your project charter. We, the oversight consultants who work with you on a day-to-day basis, we will work with you to find out what is most conducive when a change has to be rememorialized in those documents. What is the extent of change? Do we modify investment plan? Do we modify project charter? Or it is minor enough? I do air quotes here. If it is a small adjustments, we can as long as our core principles have not changed. Our core scope of work and the intended benefits have not changed. We have an underlying baseline documents that still continue to represent approval of the project. It was a little long-winded answer, but hopefully that answered it.
That answer your question, David? Any other questions coming up around that?
Okay, I hear thumbs up. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Moving to the next section. So we talked about core requirements of the project under oversight and the core policies that drive it. There, as an agency, as a statewide agency, there are several other policies that apply to all IT investments. I have it written down here and below some of the core policies that we always talk about with projects. I started with the policy, so I'll go with that. Policy 141 talks about securing information technology assets, that you have the security parameters around the outcomes of the project or the data it is handling that aligns with the sensitivity of the data. 141.10 more specifically talks about the standards of policy 141. Policy 151 talks about the disaster recovery planning so that we are prepared in case something has to go wrong with the one system in place. We have another place to go to. What does business continuity would look like in case there is a DR impact to the systems? And 183/2010 talks about identity management and user authentication standards. So those are some of the other policies that generally come up in discussions with the IT projects. There are several other policies that all agencies are expected to be in compliance with. And as you go through the policies locations and find other policy that you think may be interfering, or maybe I would use the word interfering, maybe something you might think about being challenged to meet a compliance, please reach out to us. Please reach out to either your oversight consultant or your agency's business relationship management partner, and we will work with you. We'll figure out what is the best approach to move forward. Yes.
Steve Guest just asked that he thought he had an email which changed the policy numbers. Can you speak to that? Because I think that what happened was the policies have been updated and they've been reformatted into, a more modern, but
right.
It didn't change the numbers. Is that correct?
So yes to both.
Oh.
There was a new policy also enacted, which is basically or either policy or a standard, and I don't know if Samantha Z is on the call, which talks about a naming convention of the policies and standards. So, for example, 121 policy, even though it is still 121, but the total length or the text of the name has changed to align with the naming standard and convention that has been put forward. So if the link would still go to policy 121, but when you go there, you might see 121 NW and then something more edit behind it. So yes, the names have slightly morphed, and there is a work in progress to do a crosswalk of the old names and the new names.
Okay, Steve, does that answer your question?
Okay, waiting for. Oh, it's good. Okay, all right. The other things that I should have probably covered before I went to policies is some of the gated funding requirements are applicable to the projects that are funded and also subjected to Section 701 of the enacted budget. The other projects that are required to follow 701 is those that are funded through IT pool. So there are specific requirements about gating and funds being released based on the requirements of the gate. At the end of the gate, you have a list of deliverables that you intended to complete. Once those deliverables are complete, those are verified and funding is provided for the next gate. That's an ongoing process. Those first two links about gated funding process and the certification and approval process should provide you more information about it. The third link about IT project resources. As Rishal mentioned in the beginning, we have a body of resources as part of the project management partners. They have been contributing to several set of resources and templates and helpful documents that are available on our website. It's ready for all of you to use as is or as a template or a guiding principle of what a document should contain, what a plan should look like. You're more than welcome to use it as is or as a reference, and also as a feedback from you. If you find a document that you think can be modified to be more beneficial, we'll be happy to receive your feedback and make a continuous improvement to those documents. So that's definitely a two-way street. I see a hand up.
Yeah, so Gil has a question.
Hello. Hello there. Hello. So there's a new section. I have a memo here, section 701, and it has a section number 8 about projects that exceed over $2 million. And it says in one of those paragraphs, like it says the agency and project must deploy usable functional software into production for users within 180 days of execution of a contract. I find that unreasonable. So I don't know if you guys had a chance to review that.
Gil, thank you. Section 701, I would say, has been with us since the gated funding parameters were defined by the legislators a couple of bienniums back, although it has been evolving each time we get a new budget. This time, for certainty, there have been more specificities added to the details of requirements, including what you're referring to about implementing an agile model with a 2-week sprint, functioning software deployed for user availability, and or having a production system in place within 180 days of signing a contract with the vendor, things like that. So Section 701 as a whole is not new, although specifics have been added this time around. Our office has worked with legislative partners and gone through what does that mean and provided a guideline to all agencies. I think, Diana, if I'm not incorrect, that was published probably on Friday.
Yeah, Gil, did you receive our communications that went out on Friday about 701 compliance?
It went out
I
through
don't,
it went through Gov Delivery, just in case you know, and I did just link it in the chat.
okay, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So Gil, I think, sorry, go, Diana, go ahead. What I was saying, Gil, is please read that. There is quite a bit, it is a lot of information provided in that slide deck. How we move towards agile, what are the guiding principles, why, what is the intended benefit from this legislative requirement, and how do we move forward with either projects that are currently in motion or that are now starting to define their plans, initiate the project, and go into vendor discussions. So I'm certain that there will still be questions. And again, like I've been saying, it's like a broken record maybe, but please reach out to your oversight consultants. Let's talk through when you have done some initial planning effort to what does it mean to your project, either that is already in motion or starting new, what it might mean, and then how do we move forward, staying in compliance with legislative requirements. I would also add that it is not a policy by our agency or any other agency that might provide a path for a waiver. It does not have a waiver. It is a legislated requirement. It's a law. So I would close with that, but I see another hand up.
Yeah, this is Pat, and I'm just to extend that conversation. You've kind of talked around what the previous questioner was saying, but you haven't gotten really to the heart of it. Some of the things the legislature comes up with are irrational. They're not doable. Who is telling them that what they're requiring by law is literally impossible in some cases?
Diana, like you're
Yeah, I can take this one. We appreciate the question, and 701 as it's written currently is highly prescriptive, and many folks are concerned about how to comply with the requirements of 701. So I encourage everyone, the link that Rochelle dropped into the chat. Thank you, Rochelle, for adding that link. I encourage folks to take a look at that in detail. We have FAQs, we have guidelines, we have suggested agile training opportunities. So the short answer, though, is that the way it's written now, because it applies to existing projects as well as new projects, it is very challenging for projects that are already in flight on how to make the changes to comply with the 701 requirements. So as stated in the deck, we have a plan for a suggested plan for getting after 701 compliance. So, it went into effect July 1st. So the idea is for the rest of the year to do our best to comply with 701, to please work with your assigned OC to document your efforts towards the 701 compliance journey. That's the first part of the answer. The second part of the answer to the question is that we will be talking to our legislature friends in the fall and providing them the feedback from our agency partners on what parts in particular are very challenging to comply with. So we do have an opportunity to potentially influence a revised version of 701 that would be effective in January. So the short answer is from July 1st through the end of the year, we do our best to comply, and please work with your OC to document these efforts. The focus is the success of the project. So where it jeopardizes the success of the project, we think that we have a little bit of leeway there. And then the second part of the answer is we have an opportunity to influence legislation to potentially have some changes starting January 1st. Does that answer the question?
Not really. It doesn't inspire any confidence. I've witnessed not going back to when gated funding and the IT pool was thrust upon us several years ago. I watched some of those legislative hearings with WATEC and OCIO and CIO kind of representation, and they didn't push back on anything. They just towed the legislative line and said, yeah, sure, we'll march and step and do it. Someone posted in the comments, if you're working with a vendor that is not agile, you cannot require agile. I think one of the versions that I've seen recently requires that agile, that all projects be agile or something to that effect, and that they be organized or whatever into 2-week sprints. Industry standard is like 2 to 4 weeks. It's kind of up the discretion of the organization, not some arbitrary limit by the legislature, and that they have working software or something within every one of those sprints, which is also not feasible because there are sprints where you're doing foundational work that don't, might be architecture or something. It's not working software. It's not demonstrable in any meaningful sort of way. And so these read as arbitrary requirements written into law without rational or comprehensive or professional guidance before they get into law. We shouldn't be responding after there's bad law. We should be influencing what goes into law.
Yeah, so I would like to comment on that. I do want to point out that WATEC did make an effort to influence the legislation. So we did send in our revisions, suggested revisions to 701, and those were not accepted. So we did make an effort to do that the first time around, and we are now, just like you, having to live with the law as it stands now. I will say that in my discussions with our legislative partners, that they are very open to this feedback about what parts are especially challenging. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we do have an opportunity to hopefully influence the next version of this legislation. But it is correct that it's the law now, and the expectation is that we do our best to comply with the law as it's written. But thanks for sharing. We do appreciate your input. Looks like we have some other hands up.
Yeah, Dave Yantis here. I couldn't agree with that more. I mean, in terms of forcing a design requirement on a vendor who might be a SaaS vendor who does their design different. And we're going more and more to outsourcing and less really to our internal development. And an agile is kind of like, how do you do internal development and how do you work that as compared and contrasted to how do you work with external vendors who may have the best product out there that may not be agile or that are a SaaS project that do things different. I think we have to catch up with where we are actually forced to go with how we're doing our projects these days.
Yeah, that's a great point as well. And it's it's for that requirement in particular about I think it's section D that says it must be internal staff and not externally sourced for key functions. Another bit of feedback we've gotten from some agencies is that they tried to hire internally and weren't able to, and then we had to go outside. So like if I'm agency ABC, I tried internally, it didn't work. Now I go outside. Like, am I supposed to go back inside now? And so we recognize that it is highly prescriptive. And I think something that hasn't been touched on, which I find that gives me heartburn, is that it was effective instantly, right? It was like July 1st, immediate. It wasn't like it's coming in January and we have 6-7 months to kind of catch up and figure it out. So like all of you, we are also, doing our best to interpret this law and understand what it means and pivot as fast as we can. I will say even within my own teams, I don't, not all of us are agile trained and have deep agile experience yet. So we have we have our own agile training coming up in a few weeks. So this is definitely a catch-up effort for all of us. It's a hurry-up effort for all of us. I do recommend everyone, please take a look at those slides. It will answer a lot of these questions and concerns. But what I want to highlight at this stage is that our CIO, Bill, has been very clear that we are focused on helping projects be successful. So where it doesn't make sense to do that, to comply with parts of 701 that would truly be detrimental to the success of the project, then as stated in the slides, please work with your oversight consultant to document those efforts, right? So keep in mind too, for 701, it's a complex piece of legislation. There are parts to it. Some parts may be applicable to your project and make sense and support your project success. Some may be incredibly harmful to your project success. So the idea is to, the lens is the success of the project. And then within that lens, we do our best to comply with 701 and we document those efforts. So I don't expect that every project is going to be able to comply 100% with 701. I think it's more about what I want to make sure we can demonstrate to the ledge is that this is a sincere effort, right? So I know there are parts that are highly prescriptive, but in general, like agile delivery mindset and principles, that seems like something that would benefit probably most projects, right? If a 2-week sprint doesn't make sense for your projects, maybe a 3-week does. And if we have good business reasons why, that may be sufficient. And we can take that to our ledge friends in the fall and say, could we back off of 2-week sprints, for instance? Keep in mind an agile sprint just means increment of time. I could stand up 6-week sprints if it made sense for my project. So there are pieces like that that I think in the next 6 months that will come out in the wash, but we recognize that it is incredibly challenging for projects to pivot in this way. Great discussion. Any other questions, comments at this stage?
Thank
So
you, Diana, for that. Go ahead, Rochelle.
So as an oversight consultant, I'd like to just chime in and share, as I'm working with projects and agencies that I provide oversight for, and we're talking through this, it is a difficult conversation. It is frustrating, and it is also a learning opportunity. So as Diana was saying, we can have an agile mindset when talking about the project plan. And I'll be working with and I'm sure all of us oversight consultants will be doing so. Working with you will challenge you to think about it. We'll present some, potentially present some options or examples to start the thought process rolling. We're here to be your partner in that, though. We'll also engage project management partners to help walk through that. And the bottom line is sometimes it doesn't work, and we know that. And we'll document that in your gated funding, or not just gated funding, but we'll document that in the tech budget. We'll document it on our end and share some reports and feedback. But we're in the same boat with you. And please do engage us, though. Help us help you, so that we can collect that information and share it. So that's going to be essential. And also recognize we didn't write the law. We tried to influence. We weren't exceptionally successful at that. So we're here to help you be compliant as much as possible, and also run interference or be able to document why it doesn't make sense for you. So we just can't say that enough. But we are here to be your partner in that. Okay, engage us.
Thank you, Rochelle. Onus is on us. We have an opportunity also to demonstrate, like Diana and Rochelle said, to say where this law has become too prescriptive to be detrimental to the success of the project. Like Diana said, that is the lens. What constitutes success to the project? Okay, thank you. All right, let's move to the next slide. Hopefully I'm reaching towards the close of the time here. We talked about IT dashboard requirements, the public IT dashboard that shows transparent information about the projects. Again, this comes from Session Law of 2013 that we are required to provide it and present it transparently and visibly to all authorizing environments and member of public. There is an IT dashboard where all projects are presented with their status, the project details, the leadership contact, their planned budget on a monthly basis for the current biennium and actual spent. It also shows project deliverables and how WATEC had approved the project to continue to proceed with. Here is the snapshot of how the project dashboard looks like. You can go to statewide view, program view, agency view, or a specific project view for details. There are places for resources available. This is where you will also find a file that talks about which projects have been funded in the current biennium and how much they were funded for. That can be a very helpful list if you're looking for how much money you were given through the enacted budgets. Project governance structure. Most projects do it already. As you start, you set up a governance structure, has an executive steering committee that meets on a regular basis, generally monthly or at least in the beginning. We have project manager consults with the oversight consultant on a regular basis to stay in contact with each other. We also execute the same contact check-ins with the QA provider with hours so that we are all up to date with what is the current health of the project, and are there opportunities for us to work with you and consult with you and partner with you, either directly with us or with other providers, other teams within WATEC that could help in where the project is headed to. We talked about status reporting and health assessment. Those are also some requirements that are in legislation. There is status report by the project manager. Project manager would also execute the health assessment on a monthly basis that will show how the project is measured on scope, schedule, budget, and overall health. Those are rated as red, yellow, or green scale. There is also a narrative place to provide to support that assessment. For example, what is yellow mean, why it is yellow, and what is being done to bring it back into the alignment with the plan and to address those deficiencies or make corrective actions in place. Quality assurance providers would also submit their reports and recommendations, and it will followed by the response, as we talked about in the beginning, by the project team about any recommendations there may be. And any questions? So I think, Rochelle, as we conclude this, we will probably be making this slide deck available to all participants or to the community at large. This is our pool mailbox that you can reach out to us. This email will reach to all of us in the team, and whoever may be available, not necessarily your consultant who is assigned to you, will be happy to reach out to you or work with our other WATEC teams, BRM, security, network, wherever the question may be most applicable with, to get you the information you're looking for. That concludes my talking today.
Thank you.
Rochelle, over to you.
All right, well, I see that David just added another thing to chat. How can we better address the incapability between project plans and fiscal boundaries? Incapability. David, can you come on and say more about that, please?
What I mean, it obviously spell check doesn't. I mean the incompatibility, right? Because
Okay.
projects don't really care about fiscal boundaries, right? So they're going over to fiscal boundaries all the time, and we kind of have to do some gyrations associated with those projects going across those fiscal boundaries, the year boundaries, and how we get funded. It's just how do we better do that, right? It's just like, what can we do? How can OCIO help us? How can we write our policies and processes that allow us to actually manage projects, not fiscal boundaries?
I hear you. It's rough because projects are funded fiscally, the funding that comes from the legislature or even within agencies. I think that reach out to your oversight consultant during your planning process. I can't say that enough. Oftentimes we don't get enough face time with the people, the projects as they're doing the planning. And then it seems like we're coming in, at the end when you've already done all this work, and then we start saying, no, that's not right. And we don't mean it to be like that. So as soon as you know you're going to have a project, communicate with us, reach out to the OC, reach out to the consultants pool, and state what you're doing and why, and we can respond better to you as early as we can. And but we can't do that all the time if you don't reach out to us while you're doing it. And then when we are talking through it, we also have to honor how funding works, and that's part of your project planning. So unfortunately, that becomes a constraint that you must consider when you're aligning your tasks and planning your due by dates and all of that. But we can be the most realistic about it. We can work on, if you're gated, how do the gates get broken up? Where's the most logical place in your project for gates that align with your project phase and methodology? Does anybody else want to talk on that?
I would just add one more thing to it. There are places where you may have a planning activity for upcoming project that is not become a project yet. And those are where our BRMs and our decision packet consult phases really come into play. Our BRM team has a ongoing check-ins with your agency partners, right? So those, if you're thinking about a project, please do use those opportunities to talk about what you're planning to bring in. And for each fiscal year before the budget cycle starts, we start with decision packet consults, where agencies talk about what initiatives they are planning to execute and what money they may be looking for. that's another opportunity where all of us come together, talk about what is upcoming and how do we make our pitch, so to speak.
Uh-oh, I think Puneet froze. Perfect timing. At least he didn't freeze while he was doing the presentation.
Heat exhaustion, classic case.
Jerry, do you want to chime in on that as well?
You know, I think Puneet covered it well, and you know, I would just say that that engagement is so important, and I'm as a new OC, I'm finding that it really does help both the OC side and the agency factor in things they would have otherwise not considered in the planning. And unless you do that, it's going to end up in that situation, like you said, Rochelle, where we're almost saying, oh, well, please don't, you know, that's wrong. You know, it'll come out, no matter how we put it, likely to come out wrong. So I think Puneet put it well, as did you. And yeah, the sooner we can get engaged, the better.
Mm-hmm. And so, Yesem, I see your question in the comments. If we're required to adopt agile delivery principles for oversight projects, would it not make sense to also re-examine the artifacts currently in place for OCIO approval to adapt those to agile delivery principles? Is it in consideration? Absolutely. We just took our first pass at how to streamline the deliverables that are required under oversight. So we can take your project charter, and we're doing that on purpose. You know, we're trying to reduce duplicated information, and we're trying to reduce having to come up with methodologies that align with what we're doing. OCIO is not going to prescribe in our federated state environment, I don't believe, but Diana and Deanna are here to chime in on that. We're not going to prescribe the methodology you have to use within an agency. Each agency has their own PMO practices and things like that for whatever suits the current capability, maturity, and organizational structure within the agency. We're here to help you adapt, you know, fit oversight on top of that without applying too much rigidity to requirements. Does anybody disagree with that? Okay, Jerry?
I just wanted to add, and it's something new for me in that I've seen this, but I probably had, I can't count how many discussions with project teams, and one of the concerns that they had was this very issue. And yet when we looked at the process and the steps that they were taking to try and reorganize their project or put it together, they were actually doing agile methodology, but just not calling it that. They were calling it other things. And when, you know, we took a step back and I said, well, you know, yes, you can't define all your deliverables in the outer phases, but, you know, that's part of the agile methodology. And then the light went on for them. Oh, yeah, that's right. And, you know, we have these shorter periods of time where we can deliver things on longer ones. And it's like, well, that's part of that as well. And so they started adapting themselves to, okay, so we're kind of already doing it. We just aren't quite looking at it that way. And so, you know, there is that out there as well. And it's just a point I wanted to make to try and help folks understand where this is headed. If they're already doing many of those pieces or some of those pieces, the leap is not as far. So just a thought.
I'm going to chime in here and say we have just 1 minute left in our scheduled time together. So are there any additional questions that people have? Please put them in the chat and we'll respond to you. We will be, this presentation is recorded, so we will be posting it to the OCIO website. We will be preparing the slides and a little handout that will go out with it. We'll reply all to this message or to this meeting invite because I know, or to the participant list rather, pardon me. We will get everybody on the participant list and respond to you with links to where you can go to find the information once it's posted. And recognizing that not all of you are members of the community of practice, but you might want to become one. They got to plug that in. I think that pretty much sums up our housekeeping for the day. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.